crimson sand of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly beneath twin purple suns, broken only by the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving alien settlement. Captain Jake Martinez stepped carefully through the ruins, his environmental suit's sensors constantly scanning for threats. The distress signal had been broadcasting for 3 weeks before Earth's exploration vessel Horizon finally arrived. "Another dead world," muttered his teammate, Dr. Lisa Chen, as she examined a fallen spire that twisted impossibly into the sky. "What do you think happened here?" Before Jake could respond, a low rumble echoed from beneath the sand. The ground trembled, sending small avalanches cascading from the ruined structures. Both humans froze, hands instinctively moving to their weapons. The sand erupted 50 meters away, revealing a creature that defied description. It stood 20 feet tall, its body resembling a cross between a mantis and a dragon. Crystalline, scales caught the alien sunlight, refracting it into deadly rainbow patterns. 6 limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, while 4 eyes blazed with an inner fire that seemed to burn straight through to their souls. "Guardian protocol activated," the creature spoke, its voice a harmonious blend of chimes and thunder that somehow translated perfectly in their minds. "Intruders detected. Elimination commencing." Jake raised his hands slowly, a gesture he hoped was universal. "Wait, we're not here to harm anyone. We received a distress signal." The Guardian paused, its head tilting with predatory curiosity. "You speak the old tongue. Impossible. The builders have been dead for millennia." "We're human," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the terror Jake could see in her eyes. "We're explorers from Earth. We came to help." The Guardian's crystalline scales rippled, changing from threatening red to confused amber. "Human? This designation is unknown. You are not of the Devourers, yet you walk on 2 legs. Curious." Jake noticed something that made his heart race. Despite its fearsome appearance, the Guardian's posture reminded him of something familiar. The way his childhood dog Max used to stand when confused, but not threatened. The slightly lowered head, the way it shifted its weight from foot to foot. Acting on pure instinct, Jake slowly knelt and placed his palm flat against the sand. "We're friends," he said softly, using the same tone he'd once used with frightened animals back on Earth. "We want to understand. Can you tell us what happened here?" The Guardian's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture so endearingly confused that Jake had to suppress a smile. The creature stepped closer, its massive head lowering until it was only a few feet from Jake's kneeling form. "The builders. My creators. They were consumed by the darkness between stars. I have guarded their tomb city for 3,000 rotations, waiting for their return. But you carry no darkness within you. How is this possible?" Jake reached out slowly, his gloved hand hovering inches from the Guardian's snout. The creature's breathing was deep and rhythmic, like a massive cat purring. "May I?" The Guardian's scales shifted to a warm golden hue. "You may, strange one." The moment Jake's hand touched the crystalline surface, both human and Guardian froze. Images flooded Jake's mind, memories of a proud civilization, of love and loss, of an ancient evil that had swept across the galaxy, consuming entire worlds. But through it all, he felt the Guardian's loneliness, its desperate hope for companionship after millennia of solitude. "You're not just a weapon," Jake whispered, wonder filling his voice. "You're alive. You're mourning them." The Guardian's great head pressed gently against Jake's chest, a gesture of trust that made Lisa gasp in amazement. For the first time in 3,000 years, the last Guardian of Kepler 442b was no longer alone. "Incredible," Lisa breathed, her scanner recording every detail of the interaction. "Jake, its bio readings are off the charts. This isn't just some biological weapon, it's showing complex emotional responses." The Guardian, whom Jake had begun, thinking of as Rex due to its regal bearing, lifted its head and gazed toward the ruins. "There is one who lives still, hidden in the deep vaults where the darkness could not reach, but she fears to emerge, for she believes the surface world belongs only to death now." Jake exchanged glances with Lisa, a survivor after 3,000 in years. "Can you take us to her?" Rex's scales shimmered with what Jake was learning to recognize as pleasure. The strange ones wish to heal rather than harm. Yes, this one will guide you. The Guardian moved with surprising grace for its size, leading them through a maze of collapsed buildings toward what appeared to be solid rock. As they approached, Rex placed one massive claw against a seemingly blank wall. The stone dissolved, like mist, revealing a tunnel that plunged deep into the planet's crust. The builder child Kira has slept in stasis, dreaming of better days. But the darkness grows stronger, and even the deep places are no longer safe. She must wake. The tunnel was lined with the same impossible architecture they'd seen above. Walls, that curved in dimensions that shouldn't exist, lit by crystals that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. Jake marveled at the engineering as they descended, but his thoughts kept returning to Rex's casual display of affection. The Guardian had been alone for millennia, yet it accepted human contact as naturally as breathing. "There's something different about humans, isn't there?" Jake asked as they walked. "You mentioned we carry no darkness. What did you mean?" Rex's head swiveled back toward him, those 4 alien eyes somehow managing to convey fondness. The builders could touch the void between stars, bend reality to their will. But power corrupts, and corruption draws the hungry dark. You strange ones, you touch nothing, bend nothing, yet you make everything stronger simply by being present. This one does not understand, but feels the truth of it. They emerged into a vast chamber carved from living rock. At its center sat a crystalline pod, similar in design to Rex's scales, but somehow more delicate. Within, barely visible through the translucent surface, lay a figure that was definitely not human. "Kira," Rex called softly, placing a claw against the pod's surface. "Wake, builder child, the strange ones have come." The pod cracked open with a sound like breaking bells. Steam hissed out, carrying an alien but not unpleasant scent of ozone and flowers. The figure within stirred, sitting up slowly. She was humanoid, but clearly alien, tall and willowy, with skin that held an inner luminescence and hair that moved as if underwater. Her eyes, when they opened, were vast pools of starlight. But what struck Jake most was how young she looked, despite supposedly being 3,000 years old. "Rex?" she whispered, her voice carrying the same harmonic quality as the Guardian's, but pitched higher, more musical. "I was dreaming of the old songs, before." Her gaze fell on Jake and Lisa, and she scrambled backward in the pod. "What are those? They look like the Devourers!" "Peace, builder child," Rex rumbled, moving protectively between Kira and the humans. "These are strange ones, humans. They carry no darkness, only kindness. This one has touched their minds and found no corruption." Kira's starlight eyes widened impossibly further. You let them touch you?" "Rex, you haven't let anyone approach you since the builders fell." "They are different," Rex insisted, turning to nuzzle Jake's shoulder with surprising gentleness. "This one called Jake speaks with the old kindness. He sees not a weapon to be feared, but a friend to be cherished." Jake couldn't help but smile at the Guardian's words. "We're explorers, Kira. We came because we heard your distress signal. We want to help." Kira climbed carefully from the pod, her movements graceful despite obvious weakness. She was taller than either human, nearly 7 feet, but seemed fragile as spun glass. "Help? The builders are gone. My people are gone. There is nothing left to help." "There's you," Lisa said gently. "And Rex. And maybe, if you'll let us, there could be more." For the first time, hope flickered in Kira's starlight eyes as she watched. Her ancient guardian nuzzled the strange human with obvious affection. Kira watched in amazement as Jake scratched behind what she could only assume were Rex's equivalent of ears. The Guardian, the same creature that had once destroyed an entire Devourer fleet single-handedly, was practically purring. "This is impossible," she whispered in her own language, then switched to the common tongue when she remembered the humans. Couldn't understand. "Rex has been aggressive toward everyone for 3 millennia. The Builder Council designed him that way after the first attacks. He trusts no one." "He trusts Jake," Lisa observed, taking careful readings with her scanner. "But I'm curious, why doesn't he react to me the same way?" Rex lifted his great head, considering. The Lisa human carries kindness, but differently. Her touch is of the mind that seeks to understand, not the heart that seeks to heal. Both are precious, but this one responds to healers. Jake laughed, a sound that echoed strangely in the vast chamber. You're not wrong. I was a veterinarian before I joined the Exploration Corps. Old habits die hard, I guess. Veterinarian? Kira struggled with the unfamiliar word. He helps injured animals, Lisa explained. Earth animals, but apparently the skill translates. Kira's bioluminescent skin flickered with what Jake was learning to recognize as intense emotion. You heal the small, the helpless, without payment or gain? Of course, Jake said, surprised by her reaction. They're living beings. They deserve care and compassion. Rex's scales shifted to the warm gold that indicated deep contentment. Builder child, do you see? The strange ones do not take. They give, even to creatures that cannot repay them. Kira circled Jake slowly, her starlight eyes studying him with growing wonder. The old texts spoke of such beings. We thought them myth, creatures of pure benevolence who could touch any mind without corruption. The builders called them the Kor, gentle ones, and believed they would come when darkness threatened to consume all light. We're just people, Jake protested, uncomfortable with the reverence in her voice. We make mistakes, we have flaws. Yet you touched Rex's mind and left only kindness behind, Kira interrupted. Do you understand what that means? The builders who created him couldn't even do that. His consciousness was designed to be untouchable, inviolate. But you... She gestured helplessly. You just reached out and made friends. Lisa's scanner beeped urgently. Jake, we have a problem. I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from orbit. Multiple ships, definitely not human design. Rex's head snapped up, his scales instantly shifting to deep crimson. The hungry dog comes. This one smells their corruption on the solar winds. Kira's face went pale, her inner light dimming. The Devourers. But how did they find us? Your distress signal, Lisa realized with horror. We weren't the only ones who heard it. Through the chamber's walls they could hear a sound like screaming. Metal, the cry of ships tearing through atmosphere at impossible speeds. Rex moved to place himself between the approaching threat and his companions, his body beginning to emit that dangerous rainbow refraction. This one will protect, he growled. But for the first time since they'd met him, Jake detected uncertainty in his voice. How many ships? Jake asked. 17 major vessels, Lisa reported grimly, each one the size of a city. Rex, can you handle that many? The Guardian's silence was answer enough. Kira pressed herself against the far wall, terror making her inner, a light flicker like a dying star. They'll consume everything, everyone, just like before. Jake looked at the terrified alien girl, at the Guardian, who'd become his unlikely friend, and at Lisa, who was already running calculations on her scanner. The Devourers were coming, and they were vastly outnumbered. But as he watched Rex's protective stance, an idea began to form. Kira, Rex was designed to be the ultimate Guardian, right? But Guardians aren't meant to fight alone. What do you mean? She whispered. Jake moved to stand beside Rex, placing his hand on the Guardian's flank. Immediately he felt that strange connection again, but this time, instead of just receiving emotions, he tried to send them. Calm, confidence, the absolute certainty that they would face this threat together. Rex's scales flashed brilliant white with surprise. Strange one, Jake. This one feels your strength joining mine. How is this possible? I don't know, Jake admitted, but we're about to find out. The screaming of descending ships grew louder, and the first shadows began to fall across the chamber's entrance. The Devourer ships descended like falling stars, their hulls writhing with organic corruption that hurt to look at directly. Jake felt Rex tense beneath his touch. The Guardian's consciousness a storm of protective fury and ancient grief. They looked just like the ships from my nightmares, Kira whispered, pressing herself against the chamber wall as if she could disappear into the stone. Through Rex's enhanced senses, Jake could perceive the true horror of what approached. The ships weren't just vessels. They were living things, creatures of the void between stars that had learned to mimic technology. Worse, he could sense the minds within them, twisted, hungry consciousness that fed on suffering and fear. "In 17 ships," Lisa reported, her voice steady despite the terror Jake could see in her eyes. "Estimated population, dear God, there must be thousands of them." Rex's scales had gone deep crimson, the color of dried blood. "This one has faced such numbers before. The builder homeworld fell to fewer ships. We cannot win through strength alone." "Then we don't fight through strength," Jake said, his veterinarian instincts taking over. "When faced with a frightened, aggressive animal, you didn't meet violence with violence, you found another way." "Rex, you said I could touch your mind without corruption. What if it works both ways? What if you could touch mine?" The Guardians' 4 eyes blinked in sequence, confusion replacing rage. "The Strange One would allow this? Such joining has never been attempted with non-builder minds." "The risk is worth it," Jake interrupted. "You've been fighting alone for 3,000 years. Maybe it's time you had backup." Before Rex could protest, Jake pressed both palms against the Guardian's crystalline scales and opened his mind. Completely. The sensation was like diving into an ocean of liquid starlight, overwhelming, beautiful, and utterly alien. But instead of being swept away, Jake felt something extraordinary happen. His human consciousness, shaped by evolution on Earth, began to complement Rex's builder-crafted awareness. Where Rex was designed for protection and combat, Jake brought adaptability and empathy. Where Rex saw only threats to eliminate, Jake saw possibilities to heal. "Impossible," Kira breathed, her inner light blazing brighter as she witnessed the joining. The old texts said only the gentle ones could achieve such unity. "You're really them, aren't you? The ones we've been waiting for?" The first Devourer ship landed with an impact that shook the mountain. Through their shared consciousness, Jake and Rex felt the corruption begin to spread. A poisonous influence that turned stone to writhing flesh and air to acidic vapor. But something was different this time. Instead of Rex's usual berserker fury, Jake's calm determination flowed through their bond. The Guardian's massive form began to change, scales shifting from blood red to silver white, claws extending but somehow looking less like weapons and more like tools. "The joining changes, Rex," Kira whispered in awe. "He's becoming something new." Lisa's scanner went wild with readings. "Jake, the energy output is incredible, but it's not destructive, it's protective? The radiation signature is completely different from what I'd expect from a weapon." More ships landed, disgorging creatures that were nightmares given form. They flowed across the landscape like living oil, consuming everything they touched. But as they approached the mountain where the companions sheltered, something stopped. Them. Rex had begun to sing. The sound was unlike anything Jake had ever heard, a harmony that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of reality itself. But through their bond, he understood what was happening. Rex wasn't attacking the Devourers, he was healing the corruption they brought. "The song of making," Kira gasped. "It's the song the builders used to create worlds, but Rex was never taught." "He's learning it from me," Jake realized. "Somehow my human mind is helping him remember what he was meant to be before he became a weapon." The corruption spreading from the Devourer ships began to slow, then stop, then reverse. Writhing flesh became clean stone again. Poisoned air cleared to crystal purity, and the Devourers themselves began to change. Through their shared senses, Jake could feel the alien invaders' confusion and growing fear. They were creatures of consumption and decay, but Rex's song was forcing them to remember what they had been before corruption claimed them. "They were people once," Jake whispered in horror and compassion. "The Devourers, they were just people who got lost in the dark." Rex's song grew stronger, and Jake felt tears streaming down his face as he experienced the Guardian's revelation. For 3 millennia, Rex had been destroying creatures that were actually victims. Beings who had once been as innocent as the builders themselves. "We can heal them," Jake said through their bond. "We can bring them back." "Dangerous," Rex replied, but his tone carried hope for the first time in eons. The corruption runs deep. Many are too far gone. Then we save the ones we can, Jake said simply. That's what healers do. The bond between human and Guardian flared brighter, and their combined song began to reach across the battlefield toward the Devourer ships. The first Devourer to respond to their song was small, barely larger than a human child. It had been creeping toward the mountain entrance when Rex's healing harmony washed over it. The creature's writhing form convulsed, black corruption peeling away like old paint to reveal something that made Kira gasp. A youngling, she whispered, tears of starlight streaming down her face. It's just a child. The being that emerged from the dissolving corruption was definitely not human, but unmistakably innocent. Its skin was deep purple with silver markings, and its large eyes held confusion rather than malice. It looked around in terror, crying out in a language none of them recognized. Jake, Lisa said urgently, your readings are spiking. Whatever you and Rex are doing, it's working, but the energy... I can handle it, Jake gritted out, though he could feel the strain. Healing one Devourer had taken more out of him than he'd expected. Through his bond with Rex, he could sense similar exhaustion from the Guardian. But they couldn't stop now. Across the battlefield, more Devourers were beginning to respond to the song. Some were too far gone, their corruption too deep, but others, dozens of others, were starting to remember who they'd been. The ship minds are fighting the song, Rex observed through their link. They fear to lose their gathered slaves. The larger Devourer vessels had begun to move, their organic hulls pulsing with angry red light. Through enhanced senses, Jake could feel their rage and desperation. These weren't just ships. They were the original Devourers, the ones who had first fallen to corruption and then spread it to others. They're trying to reclaim the ones we've healed, Kira said, watching as several restored beings were drawn back toward the ships by invisible force. The ship minds won't let them go. Jake felt Rex's protective instincts flare, but tempered them with his own compassion. What if we could heal the ships too? Impossible, Rex replied immediately. The ship minds have been corrupt for millions of years. They are the source of the hungry dark. Everything was innocent once, Jake insisted, thinking of the most aggressive, traumatized animals he'd treated back on Earth. Even the worst cases usually had some spark of what they used to be. Through their bond, he felt Rex consider this with the careful attention of a mind that had spent millennia learning to kill efficiently. But now, with Jake's influence, the Guardian was learning to think like a healer instead of a weapon. Dangerous, beyond measure, Rex finally concluded, but perhaps possible. The strange one. Jake carries too much hope for this one to deny. The largest Devourer ship began to move toward them, its bulk blotting out the twin suns. Jake could feel the malevolent intelligence within it, ancient, hungry, and absolutely convinced that consumption was the only reality that mattered. But beneath that conviction, faint as a whisper, he sensed something else. Pain. Loneliness. A grief so deep and old that it had become indistinguishable from rage. It lost someone, Jake whispered in sudden understanding. The first ship, it lost someone important, and the grief drove it to madness. Rex's scales flashed white with surprise. How can the strange one know this? Because I've seen it before, Jake said sadly. Animals who've lost their mates sometimes become aggressive, destructive. They lash out because they don't know how else to handle the pain. The ship loomed above them now, close enough that they could see the organic patterns writhing across its hull. Mandibles the size of buildings opened, revealing rows of teeth, designed to tear apart starships. Jake, Lisa said quietly, whatever you're planning to do it fast. My readings suggest that thing could level this entire continent. Instead of preparing for battle, Jake did something that shocked everyone, including himself. He stood up, released his physical connection to Rex while maintaining their mental bond, and walked toward the ship. Strange one? No! Rex's mental voice was sharp with alarm. Trust me, Jake replied, continuing forward. Sometimes the most dangerous animals just need someone to show them they're not alone anymore. He stopped just beyond the reach of the ship's massive mandibles and did something that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He sat down, cross-legged on the sand, closed his eyes, and opened his mind not just to Rex, but to the pain-maddened intelligence above him. The contact was like touching molten metal. The shipmind's grief was so vast and consuming that it threatened to drown Jake's consciousness entirely. But through his bond with Rex, he held on and slowly began to show the ancient creature what he'd learned about loss. Images flowed between them. Not words, but pure emotion and understanding. Jake showed the shipmind his own losses, smaller, but no less real. The patients he'd failed to save, the animals he'd had to put down when healing was impossible. The way grief could either destroy you or teach you to cherish what remained. For, in a moment that felt like eternity, the shipmind's rage faltered. And in that moment of stillness, Jake felt it remember what it had been before corruption claimed it. The mandibles slowly closed, and the shipmind spoke in a voice like dying stars. Who are you, little healer? The shipmind's question echoed across dimensions, carrying with it the weight of eons. Jake felt Rex's amazement through their bond. In 3 millennia, the Guardian had never heard one of the greater devourers speak with anything approaching sanity. I'm Jake, he said simply, his eyes still closed, his consciousness still carefully extended toward the ancient intelligence above him. I'm a healer, and you were someone once, weren't you? Before the pain made you forget. The ship shuddered, its organic hull rippling with colors that hurt to perceive directly. Through their connection, Jake felt layers of corruption beginning to peel away, revealing memories that had been buried for geological ages. Veltar, the shipmind whispered, the name carrying harmonics of loss so profound that even Rex's battle-hardened consciousness flinched. I was Veltar, before the Sundering, before she... Images flooded through their connection, memories of a civilization that made the builders seem primitive by comparison. Jake saw beings of pure thought and energy, capable of reshaping reality with their will. He saw love that transcended physical form, partnerships that lasted for millions of years, art and music that could literally create new forms of life. And he saw the moment it all went wrong. The first death, Kira whispered, somehow sensing the memories through her connection to Rex. The old texts mentioned it, but we thought it was mythology. The memories showed Veltar's partner, Ashkore, attempting to transcend physical existence entirely, to become one with the cosmic forces that shaped reality itself. The experiment had succeeded, but with devastating consequences. Ashkore hadn't just achieved transcendence. They'd become something that existed between dimensions, unable to return to the reality they'd left behind. They were trapped, Jake realized, tears streaming down his face as he experienced Veltar's anguish. Ashkore was caught between existence and void, conscious but unable to interact with anything real. Veltar's grief had been so vast that it had torn holes in reality itself. In trying to reach Ashkore, to pull them back from the space between spaces, Veltar had accidentally opened doorways to the hungry dark, the void between universes where consciousness went to die. I tried to follow. Veltar's voice was barely a whisper now, heavy with remorse. I dove into the void, seeking my beloved. But the darkness, it changed me. Made me forget love, forget hope. Made me think that consumption was the only way to fill the emptiness. The corruption that had turned Veltar and their people into devourers hadn't been malicious. It had been desperate loneliness given form. They'd been trying to fill the void left by their lost loved one by consuming everything, else not realizing that each act of destruction only made the emptiness worse. And everyone you consumed, Jake said gently. You were trying to bring them back to your reality, weren't you? You thought if you gathered enough consciousness, enough life force, you could somehow reach Ashkore. Yes, Veltar sobbed. The sound like dying galaxies. But it never worked. Each world I consumed, each mind I gathered, they all just added to the emptiness. I became the very darkness I had sought to escape. Rex's scales had gone completely white, a color Jake had never seen before. Through their bond, he felt the Guardian's worldview reshaping itself. For 3 millennia, Rex had fought monsters. Now he was learning that the monsters had once been people in pain. The corruption can be healed, Jake said with quiet certainty. All of it, but first you have to want to let go of the pain. Impossible, Veltar replied, but without the conviction the word had once carried. The void is all I know now. Without the hunger, without the consuming, what would I be? Jake smiled, his eyes still closed, his consciousness still carefully intertwined with the ancient ship mind. You'd be Veltar again. You'd be someone who loved so deeply that you were willing to tear apart reality itself to save them. But Ashkori is gone, lost beyond all reaching. Are they? Jake asked softly. Or are they just somewhere else? Somewhere you haven't thought to look? Through their connection, he felt Veltar's attention focus with laser intensity. What do you mean, little healer? Jake drew on every instinct he'd developed as a veterinarian, every moment he'd spent comforting grieving pet owners. Sometimes, when we lose someone we love, we become so focused on the place we lost them that we forget to look for them in new places. Ashkore transcended physical reality, right? What if they didn't get trapped? What if they became something wonderful that you just haven't learned to see yet? The ship mind went absolutely still, its organic hull ceasing its constant writhing for the first time in eons. Around the battlefield, other devourers stopped their advance, sensing their leaders. Sudden shift in attention. Show me, Veltar whispered. Show me how to see. Jake opened his eyes and looked up at the massive ship. Rex moved to stand beside him, the Guardian's massive form somehow managing to convey gentle support. Lisa and Kira approached more cautiously, but with wonder rather than fear. I can't show you directly, Jake said, but maybe we can learn together? The healing of Veltar took 3 days and nights. Jake, sustained by his bond with Rex and watched over by Lisa and Kira, maintained his connection with the ancient ship mind as layer after layer of corruption was stripped away. Each revelation brought new pain, memories of worlds consumed, civilizations destroyed, countless beings turned into devourers against their will, but also new hope. With each healed memory, Veltar's true nature emerged more clearly. The being Jake communicated with now bore little resemblance to the consuming horror that had arrived with the fleet. This was an artist, a philosopher, someone who had once spent centuries crafting symphonies from the songs of newborn stars. Had forgotten, Veltar mused on the third evening, their mental voice now carrying harmonics of wonder rather than hunger. I had forgotten that creation was possible. For so long, I could only unmake, only consume. But you, little healer, through your bond with the Guardian, I remember what it feels like to build rather than destroy. Rex had changed too. The Guardian's consciousness, shaped for millennia around the need to destroy devourers, was learning to see them as patients rather than enemies. Through Jake's influence, Rex was discovering that healing could be a form of protection far more powerful than any weapon. The others are ready, Rex reported, his attention focused on the devourer fleet that surrounded the mountain. Over the past 3 days, the healing song had spread from ship to ship, carried by those who had already been restored. Not all had survived the process. Some were too far gone, their original selves too deeply buried under layers of corruption. But hundreds had. Jake opened his eyes and looked up at Veltar's ship. The organic hull had changed dramatically during the healing process, becoming something that was beautiful rather than terrifying. Bioluminescent patterns flowed across its surface like living art, and the mandibles had reconfigured themselves into something that looked more like flower petals than weapons. I think I know where Ashkori is, Jake said quietly. Veltar's attention focused on him with startling intensity. Where? Jake stood up, his legs shaky from 3 days of deep communion, and gestured toward the restored devourers who filled the landscape around them. Each one glowed with their own inner light, their forms no longer writhing with corruption, but standing tall and proud in their reclaimed identities. Look at them, Jake said. Really look. You said Ashkore became one with the cosmic forces that shape reality. What shapes reality more than consciousness itself? More than the choice between creation and destruction, between love and fear? Veltar's ship began to tremble, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing faster. You believe Ashkora became the force that makes healing possible, Jake finished. The power that lets love overcome corruption, that allows hope to triumph over despair. Every time we've healed one of your people, every moment when someone chooses creation over destruction, that's Ashkore, isn't it? They didn't get trapped between realities. They became the bridge between them. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as Veltar processed this revelation. Then, slowly, a new song began to emerge from the ship. Not the healing harmony that Rex had been singing, but something older, more fundamental. A song of recognition, of reunion, of love finally understanding its own nature. My beloved, Veltar whispered, and in that whisper Jake heard the voice of someone who had just realized they had never truly been alone. You were with me all along. Every time I chose to heal instead of harm, every moment I remembered love instead of loss, you were there. The song spread from ship to ship, from consciousness to consciousness, until the entire fleet was singing in harmony. But this wasn't the consuming hunger that had driven them for eons. This was celebration, joy, the sound of the lost finally finding their way home. Kira was weeping tears of starlight, her inner light blazing brighter than Jake had ever seen it. The prophecy, she whispered. The old text said the gentle ones would come when darkness threatened to consume all light. But we misunderstood. You didn't come to fight the darkness. You came to teach it how to be light again. Rex nuzzled against Jake's shoulder, the Guardian's massive form somehow managing to convey infinite gentleness. The strange one! Jake has taught this one a new way to protect, not by destroying threats, but by healing the pain that creates them. Lisa, who had been recording everything with scientific precision, looked up from her instruments with tears in her eyes. The energy readings are incredible. What you've accomplished here, it's going to change everything. When Earth hears about this, they'll want to study it, weaponize it, turn it into something it was never meant to be, Jake said with a tired smile. That's what humans do. But maybe some of them will understand what we've really learned here. Veltar's ship began to rise, and one by one, the other restored, devourers followed suit. But they weren't leaving. They were transforming, their ships becoming something new. Jake watched in wonder as the fleet reconfigured itself into a vast mandala of light, a living symbol of healing that could be seen from orbit. Where will you go now? Jake asked. Everywhere, Veltar replied, their voice now carrying the same harmonics of hope that Jake had first heard in Rex's song. There are other corrupted fleets among the stars, other lost souls who have forgotten what they were before the darkness claimed them. We will find them, and we will sing to them of healing, just as you sang to us. And if they won't listen? Lisa asked. Then we will wait, Veltar said simply. We have learned patience from the Guardian Rex, who waited 3,000 years for the right moment to remember love. Some healings take time. Jake felt a profound sense of completion settling over him. The distress signal that had brought them to this world hadn't been a call for rescue. It had been an invitation to become something more than they'd ever imagined possible. Rex, he said, turning to the Guardian who had become so much more than a weapon. What will you do now? Kira's safe, the Builder's legacy is restored. Rex's scales shifted through a spectrum of colors Jake had never seen before. Warm golds and gentle blues, the hues of contentment and purpose. This one has learned a new way to be guardian, not just of one world or one people, but of the principle that healing is always possible. The strange one, Jake has shown this one that protection and compassion are the same thing. Kira stepped forward, her starlight eyes bright with unshed tears. I want to go with you, she said to Jake, and Lisa. To Earth, to see the world that created the gentle ones. And maybe I can help others understand what we've learned here. The last of the Builders, becoming humanity's first alien ambassador, Lisa mused. The diplomatic corps is going to have a field day with this. Not the last, Kira corrected gently, gesturing toward the transformed Devourer fleet. Many of those we healed were builders once, or beings like us. We're not extinct anymore. We're just scattered. And now we have a chance to come together. Again, to rebuild not empires, but understanding. As the restored fleet prepared to depart, Veltar's ship descended one final time. A section of the hull opened like a blooming flower, revealing a chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with gentle light. A gift, Veltar explained as the crystals detached themselves and floated toward the small group. Seeds of the healing song, attuned to your specific consciousness signatures. Wherever you go, whatever darkness you encounter, you will carry within you the power to remind others of who they were before pain changed them. Jake accepted his crystal, feeling the warm weight of it in his hands. Through his bond with Rex, he could sense the incredible complexity of the structure. It was part technology, part living consciousness, part pure crystallized hope. Thank you, he said simply, and meant it more deeply than any words he'd ever spoken. The fleet rose into the sky like a constellation being born, their combined light visible even in the brightness of the twin suns. As they departed, their song lingered in the air, not audible to human ears, but felt in the heart, a reminder that healing was always possible and love could overcome any darkness. Rex settled beside Jake with a contented rumble, the Guardian's massive head resting gently against his shoulder. The strange one. Jake has given this one a new purpose. Not to wait for threats to emerge, but to seek out pain and heal it before it becomes corruption. And you've given me something too, Jake replied, scratching behind Rex's crystalline earplates. You've shown me that the universe is full of patients who just need someone to believe they can get better. Kira and Lisa were already discussing the logistics of their return to Earth, their voices bright with excitement and possibility. But Jake was content to sit in comfortable silence with his unlikely friend, watching the alien suns set over a world that had been transformed from a tomb into a symbol of hope. In the distance, he could see new growth beginning to emerge from the sand, plants and structures that seemed to be growing directly from the harmony left behind by the healing song. Life, it seemed, had its own way of celebrating victory over despair. Ready to see what other monsters in the universe just need a good vet? Jake asked Rex with a grin. The Guardian's scales shimmered with what Jake had learned to recognize as laughter. This one is ready, strange one Jake. This one is ready. As they prepared to leave Kepler 442b, Jake realized that they weren't just returning to Earth with news of first contact, or even with proof that hostile aliens could become allies. They were returning with something far more precious, the knowledge that in a universe filled with pain and darkness, the simple act of reaching out with compassion could literally change the nature of reality itself. The stars above them seemed brighter somehow, filled with infinite possibilities for healing, understanding, and hope. And somewhere among those stars, a fleet of former devourers was already beginning their mission to spread that hope to every corner of the galaxy. Tame universe, Jake thought as he looked up at the cosmic tapestry above, was about to become a much more interesting place. End of story.